Welcome back to Chasing a Murder, where we cover some of the most entailed true crime stories. You're listening to part 154 of Life Beyond the Grave, a series covering Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, known as the Doomsday Cult. We continue to dig quite deep, searching for those mysteries and answers as to why this cult turned deadly. How did their story intertwine with so many people? How did they get that amount of people to support these strange beliefs? These very same people refuse to call it a cult. Is it or is it not a cult? Who are some of their followers? Well, her good friend Melanie Gibb, Selima, Alex Cox, Lori's niece, Melanie Boudreau. Can't forget who investigators have been watching. That would be Chad Daybell's 5 children. How do these people overlook how deep and distorted evil the story is? Will they learn? Where we left off was the earlier part of September of 2019. Lori Vallow has moved to Rexburg to be closer to Chad Daybell, her lover, who is still married and living with his wife, Tammy Daybell. According to later testimony at Chad Daybell's trial, 2019, they found that Chad and his wife, Tammy, had been ranking people light or dark. But had they taken it to the extreme that he and Lori were ranking people? Had anyone died under their ranking? It seemed that Lori and Chad's teachings were way more extreme. They were zombies, and some of them were dying. And there were more zombies. Many people that they were related to had become zombies. Looking in the Bible, Jesus did cast out demons himself. And there was no issue once he cast these evil demons or spirits out of that person's body or vessel, that they died. They continue on living. They lived long, fruitful, healthy lives forever with their loved ones surrounding them. Jesus referred to this as a cure or healing. But in Chad and Lori's world, if you're invaded by a demon, you no longer are even in that body. Hence, zombie. And I've often wondered, where did Lori get her ideas for Tylee Ryan being possessed by a demon? What were some of the signs? Something we noticed in this story is how Lori would refer to her daughter's pancreatitis, her abdominal pain. And I believe that is one of the things that she was able to determine, that Tylee had a demon residing in her body. If you look in books and online, one of the signs is that you have frequent abdominal pain and headaches. A few more symptoms are panic attacks, depression, aggression. Ironically, in Chad Daybell's trial, his daughter Emma Daybell testified that she was dealing with a dark entity. She was dealing with stress, depression, panic attacks. She asked her dad to cast out this body snatcher or dark spirit. There's quite a difference between Charles' casting and Emma's. One lives and one doesn't. We're going back to Tylee and JJ and looking at how they apply their dark invaders, the symptoms that they're having. And it seemed that we know Chad was looking up a lot of these symptoms, and so was Lori online and in books, in which they confer and agree that many times they were acting demonic. Lori was the biggest discerner in this case. I have to say, with Tylee Ryan, they were looking to see what their new obligations in life were. Lori noticed that Tylee was acting much differently than the Tylee she knew, and that Tylee was picking up new skills of her own. Tylee was also displaying different personality traits. Let's put it together. She's having abdominal pains. She's not sleeping well. She's acting out, obtaining new skills. Though we cannot prove exactly when Tylee became a zombie and why, we know that Tylee was possibly too needy for Lori. And not only that, Tylee may have been a witness during the murder of Charles Vallow. Tylee's becoming a zombie may have been a way to get rid of witnesses. Tylee was of no use to Lori Vallow. The only thing that was of use to Lori was Tylee Ryan's Social Security. And so this is one of the main interests Lori has. In fact, Lori actually has her own daughter manipulated to share a bank account before she disappears. This would actually basically, for sure, make her Social Security more attainable to Lori if Tylee wasn't around. Taking a closer look about this time. If you think about it, Tylee and JJ were basically living a life where they had nothing. And Lori had whittled them down to nearly absolutely nothing. The only thing they had with them was a few clothes, unused medication, as well as a few personal items like their tablets. The saddest part is Lori had absolutely zero intentions of making a home in Rexburg for her children. They were living in the moment out of suitcases, bags, at least until Lori completed her mission. One part of the mission was complete. Charles was gone. Now there was only Tylee, JJ, Brandon, and Tammy Daybell left. And while Lori, Chad, and Alex are planning more murders, Lori continues to use her manipulation skills in order to control how people see her, her family, and her lover, Chad Daybell. Meanwhile, Tammy Daybell has been volunteering at the school at public races. Tammy is a very productive and useful person within her community. And on Saturday morning, September 7th of 2019, Tammy is helping her son-in-law with a public race. Her boss, Richard Garner, noticed excitement coming from the park. Mr. Garner says that he and his wife get on their bike and ride down to the area to check it out. I am about to share Mr. Garner's testimony from Chad Daybell's trial 2019. It states how he seen Tammy and how she was finishing a 5K run. This is important because Tammy Daybell's children, especially Emma, will try to testify that Tammy had health issues. Those were very contradictory to what her surrounding employees said. To be honest, everyone that ever knew Tammy didn't see any signs of health issues. Let's listen to Garner describe that day.
Going back to the summer and fall of 2019, first, can you explain to the jury what was Tammy's job at the school?
She was our librarian. That was her main job. That was like on her contract. That was her main focus. But she also expanded that. She would do the usual librarian things with checking out books, reading stories to the little kids. It was kindergarten through third grade. So she was working with them. But she also developed and helped us organize our computer lab. I asked her to help to make that better, and she was good with computers. So she was developing our computer lab and showing them basic skills and internet safety and those kind of things. And then she volunteered. She covered some lunchroom duties, outside duties, and then in the lunchroom, she offered to check the kids in for lunch and take the count for the lunch count on her lunch break.
So is it fair to say she did a lot of things that she hadn't been originally hired for?
Yes, she was covering a lot of things.
Were there ever things that she volunteered to do at the school?
Yes, all the time she would just help out wherever she could.
Did you ever have her build a website for the school?
No, she made a little web page for the kids when they went into the lab to click on it and be able to go into the programs they used, and just she built that just kind of her own as part of the computer lab.
Did she ever do anything with respect to the library windows and curtains?
Yes, well, she's always looking ways to help out and improve, and I just remember one time she came and she said, I need to get your approval for something. And I wondered what that would be. And she walked me down to the computer lab and the library. She's like, I made these curtains for the lab. I hope it's okay. Our kids are peeking in during recess, they're peeking in and interrupting the kids when they're trying to study and read, and I'm trying to help them. And so I made these curtains. Can I hang them up? Is that okay with you? So she would do things like that.
Based on your perceptions of Tammy, was she someone who was well liked at the school?
Yes. She was always helping everybody, and she interacted with all the faculty because she would take their students at library, and that was their preparation time. So she would interact with all the teachers and duties. She would interact with teachers and other members of our faculty and staff. So yeah, and I never heard anyone say anything bad ever about Tammy.
I want to ask you some questions about observations that you may have had about Tammy's activity or health. First, let's start. Can you describe for the jury the layout of your school?
I won't bore you with the layout of the school. We're just going to throw in some clips and edit out the information we really don't need to know. Here we go.
Did you ever observe anything that would have caused you to identify whether or not she might have had a health concern?
No.
Based on your observation, did she appear to be healthy?
Yeah, she was just really active, energetic, happy all day.
Did you ever notice any changes to her weight, either up or down?
I don't recall any significant change in any way.
While Tammy was working at the school, do you recall, was she someone who took sick days?
No, she's very reliable. Usually, as an administrator, you kind of know the people that have a lot of sick days or are often gone because it's very difficult to get substitute teachers.
So her boss never recognized a time that Tammy needed to take time off for being sick.
Don't remember her to have any sick days?
I don't recall any sick days.
Did you ever come to know anything about Tammy's activity level when she's not at the school?
Well, I would hear at the end of the day as teachers were leaving and, closing down the day.
Upon your personal knowledge, things that you observed, did you ever observe her in any activities outside of the school?
Well, I saw her getting her car going to Zumba with other teachers, her daughter, and then they were heading to other classes or things, and then I did see her at a road race, a running race.
Can you first identify when you saw her there and where, and then will you tell the jury about that experience?
Sure. It was a Saturday morning, September 7th, and I just were out working in my yard, and we lived 2019. But out working in the yard, it was an early morning, and our house is about 1 block from a park. And so whenever there's a race or an event, we can hear the music. So we heard music playing a morning of September 7th, and I wondered what it would be. A good friend of ours has the timing business for most of the road races in that area. So I asked my wife, do you want to ride bikes, or do you want to go over and say hi to our friend that runs the timing business? Perhaps he would be there. So we rode our bikes over and saw that it was his timing business. And we walked over. He was not there, but others. So we just visited with people we knew. And I remember just finishing that up and turning to look, and Tammy and her daughter, Emma, were crossing the finish line. And I went, oh, I'll go say hi to Tammy and Emma, just like you would with colleagues and normally. And so I went over and talked to them.
Let me back up in case I missed it. What kind of a race was this?
Oh, it had a variety of distances, but I believe they ran the 5K.
And when you went over to talk to Tammy, what did you observe about her physical condition at the end of the race?
She just looked like someone who ran a 5K. And she was just Tammy. She's like, I said, hey, good morning, you did it. Oh, it's good to see you guys. I didn't know you were be running. And she said, oh, yeah, we're here to support Joe. That was Emma's husband, and he had been sponsoring the race. It was raising money for a charity, so they wanted to support him. So she and Emma ran the race, and we just chatted for a moment. They just were catching their breath and sipping waters, and just like normal people that are finishing a race, and then said goodbye, and then we went home.
So, based on your observation of her at the end of the race, was there any reason for you to think that she wasn't healthy based upon her completing this race?
No. I've seen a lot of people finish races. I've coached a lot of cross country and track, and actually helped time some of those events at those races. And I've seen people finish and what different ways that they finish, and there was not any concern I had for them. They seemed totally fine.
So Emma Daybell's husband was sponsoring this race, and Tammy was there to be very supportive to her family and her community. So this is what Tammy Daybell's doing with her days, but her husband, he's running out of money. He's scrambling to get money to continue cheating. We learn a lot about Chad Daybell's teachings and his interest from Emma Daybell testifying at Chad Daybell's trial. He was very interested in Brigham Young.
As he could, so he was really interested in teachings from Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and similar early leaders of the church.
Would it be fair to describe your father as a fundamental?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and you didn't share his religious beliefs?
Not necessarily.
Okay, some of them you were.
Yes.
Some of them that are consistent with your current LDS faith, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, but you would describe him as someone from days gone by, foregone?
Yes.
Okay, very traditional?
Yes.
Okay, literalist?
I don't know what you mean by that.
Looked at the words and applied the plain meaning of the words?
Yes.
So a lot of these teachings have changed over the years, especially from the days of the fundamental doctrines and leaders. One of the teachings that changed was polygamy. Brigham Young even had what they called death angels, or Lori Vallow's version, her brother, protective angels. We'll continue to talk about some of these things, and then just remember, we've already recorded and talked about some of them in past series. So right now, we'll continue talking about Tammy. Before we get into Tammy's health, let's also listen to the testimony of Emma where they talk about castings, because Emma said that she had a casting performed on her.
And all Christianity and the Bible, the Savior would cast spirits out of people.
Okay. And at this point, as a result of casting out the spirits, does that mean that after they cast the spirits out, you die?
No.
Is there any instant that you can recall in your teachings as part of the fundamental or LDS church where by casting out a spirit, the result is someone dies?
No, the goal of it is so that way you have your own body back and can be in control of yourself.
Okay. Have you ever heard the word zombies?
Just on TV and movies.
Okay. And at this point, are you aware of whether by stating someone's a zombie and you do one of these castings, does that mean the person dies as well?
No.
Okay. And again, part of that casting and removal of the dark entities is also consistent with your LDS faith, is that correct?
Yes.
I want to talk to you a little bit about a subject called the emotion code. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
It was developed by a man named Bradley Nelson. The idea of it is that you use objection, your honor, relevance.
Stand. Were you aware of whether or not your parents used the emotion code?
Yes, they did. Objection, your honor, relevance. I would use it.
Hold on, before you keep answering, there's an objection that's pending. I am going to sustain the objection. There's been no relevance established for this, Mr. Pryor.
Now, it's very important you remember how pushy Emma was with that answer right there when they object for her answering it. Because when she answers questions for the prosecutors, she uses less words and she's less enthusiastic about answering. So just remember that, guys. Emma describes her parents' personalities.
How would you describe your father's personality?
Very introverted.
Much like your mother?
Yes.
Without Without name calling, would you describe your mother and father as more of a bookworm type?
Yes.
Okay. But your father enjoyed expressing his views about his religious theories, correct?
He enjoyed speaking in front of groups and teaching, but not necessarily talking one-on-one with many individuals. That would be very draining for him. But talking in front of a group and teaching had a different energy about it.
Okay. And your father found great satisfaction in anyone who would take an ear expressing his views, and once he got on the subject, he would...
It was something he was passionate about, and he enjoyed talking about it.
This is important to understand because Chad Daybell's life, from the time, if you read his somewhat biography, starting with One Foot in a Grave and his books written after that, you will know that he is constantly living in this fantasy or supernatural world. From 2004 to September of 2019 in this timeline, Chad Daybell has lived a constant life as a fantasizer, a fantasy-prone personality. His daughter Emma has more than supported that truth, that her father did this as a hobby on his spare time, in between working, while working, doing it in his books, and now he's doing it in texts. This was a serious, constant problem for Chad Daybell, never wanting to live in reality. And this might be why they didn't succeed so much as they had hoped. Most people go golfing, play video games or board games, but Chad fantasized. Chad has sacrificed everything in order to live in this fantasy realm. In my opinion, Chad was not able to be a responsible father or husband because he was so overtaken by these fantasies. When he meets Lori, this only fuels this fantasy. He's consumed with becoming a leader. If you think about it, this is role playing on steroids. So he and Lori were playing out their past lives, telling stories about those past lives. If you remember, we gave a small introductory about Chad writing this novel, mini novel, about James and Elena, which is Lori and Chad from past lives. They referred to themselves as James and Elena, and they were intertwining the reality with their fantasy. And they were mixing these lives, the past lives, with the future lives, with the present lives, so much so that I don't know how they kept up with it. What bothers me most is how he lectured Tammy for playing Frontierville. Remember, Chad was not only raising his children to be Tammy's enemy, he was also raising them to believe that he was a special, gifted man of God. He's telling his kids that he loves them more than anything and that he would do anything for them. But the reality is this. Everything he's doing right now in this timeline, he's doing to destroy them. And for me, what I've discovered is that Chad is one of the most selfish, hateful, uncaring men on this earth. Because of the 5 years of time and research I put into this case, I developed this very strong opinion that he's one of the most selfish, conniving, lying, manipulating, greedy backstabbers I have ever investigated. Besides Lori Vallow, both he and Lori were great at pretending that they cared about people, but in all reality, the only thing that mattered was them. One of the main reasons that I cover this story and continue to cover this story is to find out how in the world could so many people be led down this path, and how in the world with so many people did it get so bad before finally someone could do something about it. It's around this time in the timeline that him and Alex are hanging out at his house. Tammy's alive. Lori's just living not too far away in a townhome. She has her niece coming up shortly to look around and see if she likes the area. That niece is Melanie Boudreaux. They're going through a divorce, and that divorce is not pretty. But Melanie Boudreaux is about to get a large sum of money. That makes sense why Lori would want Melanie to come hang out with her. Lori seems excited for the plans that are coming next. But they're not something you would think a mother should be excited for, since it involves her kids dying. Who's first? Well, it's going to be Tylee Ryan. Right now, they're planning a trip to Yellowstone. I never could find a reason for why they made Yellowstone Tylee's last little event, other than it has some ties to the LDS, which we'll go into maybe later. And so it will be Lori, Alex Cox, Tylee Bryan, and JJ Vallow preparing to go on this trip to Yellowstone. This is where I'm going to end for right now. Guys, hang with me. We're getting there. I just want to make sure that we cover everything because I feel like it's important. I have worked 5 years and nearly almost every day of my life putting this timeline together. And I still haven't finished, but it's just a massive story. Please, if you'd like it or you listen to it, because there's several people that listen, you haven't subscribed. Please subscribe. You don't have to stay subscribed, just subscribe. And like, share, tell your friends about this horrible story. And don't forget that we have girls out there that continue to go missing. Share their face on your social media. Hopefully, maybe those families can find some answers too. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.